Hooray! It's showtime!
Now it's time for the Disney View podcast. Please move across your car to make room for everyone. Our podcast will begin momentarily. Join Dave as he makes his Grand Circle tour around the Walt Disney World Resort. Dave is a dreamer and an engineer who enjoys the magic and wonder of it all, but understands Disney's place in history and respects the legacy that's been left. Come along and hear Dave's thoughts about Walt Disney World and see it through Dave's eyes.
Please stand clear of the podcaster. Por favor, manténganse alejado del David.
And now, here's your host.
Hey everyone, it's Dave. Welcome to another edition of Dave's Disney View podcast. Well, you may hear in my voice that I sound a little different today, and I was going back and reviewing some of my podcasts from previous years, from the late May, early June timeframe, and I've discovered that I seem to have an allergy due to everything coming into bloom this time of year. And I always seem to get this sort of Barry White, maybe Darth Vader voice going on here. So it's kind of fun. I have a little fun with it. I called my wife the other day, and she actually didn't recognize my voice when I called. I thought that was kind of funny. But anyway, that's the way it goes. You can hear it in my voice, and I'll just kind of push through it and get this podcast out. On my last podcast, I talked about going to Disney World with my daughter and going to the Animal Kingdom specifically. And it got me to thinking about all the field trips that I took over the years going to the Disney resorts and, mainly the Magic Kingdom, of course. And it was kind of fun. And I kind of wanted to think back on it and kind of share some memories with you. Now, as you may be aware, the Magic Kingdom opened in 1971. Well, you're probably aware of that. What you may not be aware of is that I was actually 5 years old at the time. And so I was in kindergarten when the Magic Kingdom opened. And I went shortly after that. I think I went early in 72, if I'm not mistaken. That's my recollection of it anyway. With my parents, we took that trip up there. And it was really cool. It was one of those amazing experiences that really just kind of set it in motion. It's something that I was really interested in, and it was fascinating to me. And it was more than theme park and amusement park. It was something more immersive, and it was much more fun, and there was a certain thrill in going there. And we went many times as a family over the years. We went at least once a year, every year, from 72 until I graduated from high school in 84. So we went pretty much every year, and it was several trips sometimes during the year. We'd go once, like in the fall, and we'd go once during the summer. And the summer trips were always kind of fun. You'd go for 3 or 4 days, and you'd stay at one of the resort hotels, maybe the Contemporary or the Polynesian, and you'd hang out there, and you'd go in the Magic Kingdom, and you'd spend all your time in the Magic Kingdom. Then maybe you'd go over and you'd hit River Country, or you'd go and, or by the time that the Disney Village Marketplace opened up in 1975, you'd go over there for part of the day. It was really kind of fun. There was a lot of things to do, though it wasn't quite the same as it is today with the plethora of things to do. But we'd spend hours and hours and hours in the Magic Kingdom. We'd see the same attraction over and over and over again, but it was so awesome. And there was some, fun that came along with that. And so, that's how I got a lot of my trips in. But every year, starting in, I believe it was 5th grade, I went every year, except for one, with my school. My parents would drive me over to the school at about 5 o'clock in the morning. So it's still dark out. Typically, the time of year was early spring. So it'd be like February, March, something like that, typically. And we'd be there and hanging out, watching the buses sit there. They're just getting started. The bus drivers are drinking their coffee. And you're kind of just enjoying the moment here. You have this anticipation of going to Disney World for the 1 or 2 days before. You and your friends, maybe even a week before, you and your friends were talking about all the things you were going to do, all the attractions you were going to hit, all the things you were going to have fun with. And you would just have fun talking about it. And there was a certain thrill in just the excitement of it. So you'd be there at 5 o'clock in the morning. The buses are lined up. It's still dark out. The lights are on the buses. And there's the hubbub. The parents are all tired, but you're like so excited because you're going to Disney World. And so we'd get on the bus, and the bus would pull out in 5:15, 5:30, something like that. And about midway along, somewhere around, I guess, somewhere up by where Yeehaw Junction is in that area, I can't remember what the Canoe Creek Service Plaza maybe, you'd have a stop. And it'd be a quick break just to stretch your legs, go to the bathroom, and then have 15 minutes to just kind of hang out. And we'd hit whatever restaurants were there, the little buffet restaurants that were there at the rest stop along the turnpike. have a little fun with it. We'd all be having a great time. It's like this one more moment of anticipation because you're sitting next to your bus buddy, but when you actually get off the bus, you see all your friends and you get a chance to chat for one more time before you get to the park. And then you get back on the bus. So, this is about 7:30 in the morning or so. You're stopping. You get back on the bus. You head up, and you'd arrive around 9 or 9:30, somewhere in that range. So, the park is just opening. When we were going to the Magic Kingdom, we would always go to the Transportation and Ticket Center, and we would pull up behind the Transportation and Ticket Center to the bus parking lot there. And that was always kind of cool because we were in that bus parking lot. They'd hand you a slip to tell you which bus you were on, what bus slot you were in. So that way when you came back, you knew which bus to get on. So they'd hand that to you and you put it in your pocket and walk off. Go up to guest relations right there at the end of where the Transportation and Ticket Center is. So you have the ticket windows, and then off to the side there's a little window kind of between there and where the what's that building now? It used to be the Kennel Club, where they'd have the dog kennel, but it's a different building now. I can't think of what it is now. Lost and Found, that's what it is. And you would go to the little customer service window there, the guest relations window, and they'd pick up all the tickets, and then they'd hand them out to you. Now, this was back in the day, early on, it was back in the day when they had the ABC tickets. You'd have the entry ticket, you have the monorail ticket, and you'd have your ABC tickets. So they'd give you a book of tickets, and that was part of the price of going. So early in the time I went up there, I got to imagine that the price was no higher than like $15 or $20. The main cost of it was the bus. And you take the bus up, and that was your primary driver of cost because the ticket book was only like $7 or $8. I mean, it wasn't that much for the main ticket book. And you take a few extra bucks with you. Your parents would give you a little extra money so you could buy some extra ticket books. So you could buy some of the extra entry tickets if you wanted to ride on something again, because the ticket books only came with the A through E tickets. And if you wanted more, you had to purchase them. But they weren't expensive. It was like, I think the maximum was like $1 or something. Anyway, so you'd go through, and you'd head off and get in the monorail. And this was the old style monorail with the seating. They'd have the pneumatic doors that would open, and you'd crawl across to your seat, and you'd ride over to the Magic Kingdom. And it was so much fun, that anticipation in that moment when you're in the monorail. You see it pull in, you get in, you ride over, and you go over to the Magic Kingdom. Now, on my 5th grade trip, they had everyone stay together, or the whole group stayed together. So we were just as a group. We were, we went in. We were with one teacher. The whole group stayed together for the day. We did different things. It was fun. By the time I got to be in 6th grade, they let us break up into groups. You had to pair up with at least 2 people. You could do more. You could do 4, 6, whatever. But you had to do at least 2 people in a group and have a buddy with you. So we'd go off and we'd do the buddy system. We'd hang out. You pick your best friend and you go off. Maybe sometimes you'd hit up with a couple of friends. Maybe sometimes it's a group of 4, and you'd go off and you'd do some fun things. And you just go around from attraction to attraction. And you'd have your day planned. And you'd just have so much fun. Then you'd stop over and get something to eat. We used to go to where the Friar's Nook is now. That used to be a pizza place. And that was one of our favorite places to have lunch every single time we were there. You'd just go over and grab a couple slices of pizza. Or actually, maybe it was more like a personal pizza, as I recall now. But anyway, that was one of the places. The other one was over at the Tomorrowland Terrace. They used to have hot dogs and hamburgers there, of course, because everybody had hot dogs and hamburgers, and we used to go there a lot too. So you'd go there, you'd have a little fun, you'd tool around for a while, ride all the attractions you could, and you had to typically there was a meetup at some point. After we got to 6th grade, you had to meet up at, I want to say it was like, maybe it was twice during the day. It was like 11 and 2 or something like that. There was a meetup point in front of the castle. So we'd all have to go over there and meet up and see the teacher, make eye contact. So they knew we were still there. We hadn't run off or anything. And then we'd be free to go off again. And then at the other appointed time, we'd come over and do it. Might have actually been later. 11 and 2 might not be right. It might have been like 1 and 4 or something like that. But there was a couple of times that you had to go and you had to meet up with the teacher and make eye contact. And then you go off and you'd run around and you'd have more fun for a while. And typically the bus would leave between 6 and 7. So about 6 or 6:30 you'd head out and you get back on the bus and take the bus back. They'd make one stop on the way back, same thing, about halfway through. And then you get home about 10 o'clock at night or so, 10:30, something like that. And it was really pretty fun. It felt like long days, and it really was. But we weren't driving, so kind of interesting. And we'd always fall asleep on the bus ride home because it was just so much energy used throughout the day, and it was really kind of fun. So that was kind of the story of the trips. Now in 5th grade, like I said, we all had to stay together as a group. In 6th grade, they let us go off in our own little individual groups. So me and my best friend went off, and we did some things. And we met up with some other groups along the way. And we had some fun just kind of hitting up different attractions and whatever. One of the places that we enjoyed going was the Frontierland Shooting Gallery. It was kind of a fun little thing. You're not really shooting anything at anything. It's all these laser pointed air rifle things that you were doing. And we'd have some fun shooting up the things that were there. By the time we finished 6th grade, we figured out that there was an even better game center over in the Contemporary. So what we would do is, at a certain point during the day, we would actually take the monorail, head over to the Contemporary, and actually go play in their game center. And there was a shooting gallery there, plus a ton of video games that were just so much fun. So we'd spend maybe an hour in there just playing around and shooting the shooting gallery, playing the video games, doing some other things, and just hanging around. And that was actually kind of fun. It's one of those more memorable things. We actually left the park to go over there for about an hour and just have fun. It was entertaining, and I remember Ross and I we just hang out. And it was like a blast. It was one of those things. It was just really a good time. Then we'd come back and join up with our friends again. And we'd say something about having left and gone to the Contemporary, and they'd be like, "You did what?" Because it was just unfathomable that we'd leave the Magic Kingdom. But we made our assigned time, so everything was fine. Then we figured out there was a little food court down there by 8th grade, and we ate food there too. So that was kind of fun. And I think in 8th grade we talked a couple of other kids going over with us to the Contemporary and having some fun there. And of course by 8th grade, now you're an early teenager, so hormones are kicking in. So now you're trying to find the girl you're going to be with. It's not just about hanging out with your friends. You want to hang out with some girls too. So you kind of mix and match a little bit. And that was interesting. You'd have the little rivalries over certain girls and, whatever. It's just silly, teenage stuff, but it was fun. And it's kind of memorable in its own way that we'd sit there and we'd, try and pick up our friends, basically, like we're real boyfriend and girlfriend kind of thing. It was just kind of funny, just an amusing thing you do as a teenager. And it was kind of fun to remember now. I reflect on it kind of fondly. So that was, 6th, 7th, and 8th, we did that. By 9th grade, I went to a high school that most of my friends didn't go to, but I had a couple of friends that were still there with me, and we were doing the same thing. I think we may have actually left a little bit later to go to the Magic Kingdom, as I recall. We may have left at like 7 in the morning instead of 5 in the morning, but it was still an interesting trip up there. The one thing I remember that was different, there were a couple of kids who were on the bus who were, I'll just say they were the stoners, right? So they had some things with them that probably weren't age appropriate, probably weren't right, and, they were getting themselves wasted. And it just sort of changed the nature of my thought about Disney, because I was still the little kid who wanted to go to Disney, and they were being, these kids who really thought it was really cool to, get stoned and get wasted and go into Disney World and go into the Magic Kingdom. And I couldn't understand that. I couldn't understand that difference, why kids wanted to be that way. That's never who I was, and I always just saw the magic and wonder of all of it, and it was kind of fun for me. But these kids went off. They had what they considered a good time, and I was having my best time. I had one friend I hung out with for the day. We went over. Now, one thing I remember about him, he had taken up cigarette smoking, and I couldn't deal with that. So I'm like, why don't you just stand here and have a cigarette, and I'll go over there and have some fun, and I'll come back and get you in 20 minutes. And I did that. And it, just because it was like, why would you waste your time doing that when we're having fun? But that was him, so whatever. So he did that. We did whatever. We had a good time. I think we had to meet up with our teachers at one point during the day. I think it was maybe only one point. We were there, and I had my fun. We had a good time. It wasn't quite as much fun as it had been with my older friends from middle school, but it was still fun. I still had a good time. And then I heard about what happened. Apparently, a couple of the kids who had gotten a little bit wasted went a little too far in some things, and they the story never really came out as being the accurate story, but what I gather from it was a couple of them accosted Minnie Mouse and picked her up and threatened to throw her in some water somewhere. I think it was down by where the water is in front of the castle, the moat in front of the castle. I think that's where they were going to throw her. And they threatened to throw her in there. I don't think they actually did, but security was called. They were arrested. Several of the teachers had to go and basically bail them out and take them out of the park and wait for the rest of us to be done. We went back to our homes, and our school was banned from going to Disney. Great, right? So it was just one of those things where, I got kind of screwed, I'll say, because some other people were being stupid. And it was just kind of dumb. It was one of those things where you go, really, how did that happen? So that would have been early 1981, I think, when that happened. So that was my freshman year in high school. So we didn't go at all as a high school in 81 into the early part of 82 because we couldn't. We weren't allowed to. We were banned for, I think they rescinded the ban sometime like 4 or 5 years later, but we weren't allowed to go. So I went with some friends. I think we went on a family trip with another family is the way it worked out. There was 2 families that went up together. So I was there with a friend, but not really there with the friend, if that makes any sense at all. And it was kind of fun. We had some fun anyway. That was my sophomore year in high school. Not the same, but it was still fun. It wasn't a school-sponsored trip. And that reminds me, there were other times that I went up somewhere in that same range where, I'd go with another relative. Some relative would go, I want to go to Disney World. Do you want to go? And we'd just go for the day. And it was just a glorious time where it was very different. So inexpensive to get in. It was so much fun. We just go for the day, basically. And there was there was nothing around it. There was no trappings. It was just go and have fun. It was great. So anyway, my junior year, things changed. In my junior year, we had a science club. And the science club was very interested in going and checking out Epcot, which had just opened. Now, I was at Epcot on opening day, and it was really cool. I enjoyed it thoroughly. But I was the only one in this science club that had gone. So we were talking about it, and we go, we should make a trip to Epcot. So we actually managed to convince Disney to let us go as a small group, not as a school group, as the science club. So it was like one van full of kids. It was like maybe 12 or 15 kids, and the science teacher. And we took a trip up there, and it was the same kind of a trip. We got up at, 5 o'clock in the morning. We met up at the school parking lot. We got in a van, and we all rode up to Disney World. And it was a fun time, because this time we did Epcot instead. It was the first time I did Epcot as a school trip. And it was really cool because it was just a small group of us who were really interested in the science and the nature of what Epcot was and what it stood for. And so we kind of explored it through those eyes. You look at it through that lens. In the early days of Epcot, this was maybe 3 or 4 months after it opened. We're up there, I guess it must have been a little bit more than that. It was probably in February or so that we went. So about 5 months after it opened. And we're there and we're looking at it through the lens of students trying to see what the world is really all about and what science is and what technology they're bringing us. And it was cool. It was a really fun adventure going through there and exploring the park and just kind of checking it out, seeing the countries for really the first time, even though I'd been there with my family. It was seeing them through a different lens and really kind of enjoying it. Now, me at that point, having been the only veteran, I could tell a few things about things that I had seen and some things that maybe were worthwhile and some maybe that weren't. And I think I filled in, between the 2 trips, I did everything there was to do that was open at the time. So I saw pretty much everything. Of course, I couldn't have eaten at all the restaurants, but at least I saw everything that was open. And it was cool. It was really neat. And we got in the van and drove home, and we probably left, I'm going to say around 7 or 7:30 again, drove home, and I remember talking to my teacher the whole way back. And it was funny, at the end, he said to me, hey, thanks for talking to me the whole way home. It just helped keep me alert. I was like, hadn't really thought about it. But now that I look back on it, I think about that sometimes when I take the drive because, as you get a little older, it gets a little harder to make that 3.5-hour drive, 3.5 hours-ish drive, especially after you're tired with a day in the park. So it was kind of neat. I just remember that as one of those moments. And we talked about what it was, and we spent a week or so going over the things that we had seen from a scientific perspective, the things that Epcot brought, and what we talked about. I distinctly remember going into the Land Pavilion and doing the Living with the Land because it would have been Listen to the Land at that time. And we did the Listen to the Land, and that was one of the more interesting things because it talked about some novel approaches to producing crops. And that was just kind of an interesting scientific endeavor, and it was so detailed, and there were so many things. We asked questions while we were going along because it was the guided tour. They still had the guide on board the boat at that point. So it was really pretty neat. So that was my sophomore year was really, that would have been my junior year. That was really pretty cool. And that was neat. And then my senior year, we still weren't allowed to go back as a school. But Disney did allow us to go to grad night as long as we met certain criteria and we were able to behave ourselves and we would be watched closely and whatever. So we did grad night. And that would have been at the end of my senior year, around this time of year. It was maybe early May or so. And it was a really interesting thing. I'd never experienced something like that before. So the way this one worked, you came up and actually we parked in the Magic Kingdom parking lot. Well, We parked at the Magic Kingdom. We actually were the bus pulled in behind where the Carousel of Progress is. There's a parking lot back there. And that's where we were let off. And we were taken into backstage area and then taken over to Cosmic Rays where we had dinner, and they served us dinner. Now, all that are there is high school students. We got there, I want to say we left school at about 2:30 in the afternoon, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So we got there, somewhere around 6. The park opened up to us at 7. And it was only open to high school students. It's a select number of high school students that were there, a select number of high schools. From my high school, there was probably 2 busloads, I think. So about 100 kids or so, give or take. And we went in. The rules were you had to dress formally. You had to wear a tie and a jacket and nice pants. And girls had to dress in at least like cocktail attire or something like that. And, you had to be dressed appropriately, and they were checking as everybody was getting off the bus to make sure you were dressed appropriately. We went in and we had dinner at Cosmic Rays. They had a special dinner set out for us. And then we were let loose in the park. And there was something really fun about the whole experience because I wasn't there with my school per se. I wasn't there with my family. I wasn't there with for any other reason other than to have fun with a bunch of other high school seniors. And I'd heard stories about some high schools having rivalries and having issues while they're in the park. We didn't have any. We were fine. We were having a good time. It was me and 4 of my friends. I'm sorry, there was 4 of us total. It was me, Mike, Mark. Yeah, okay. There was 4 of us total. And we were going around, and we were going to be the 4 musketeers going around the park. We were just going to have a great time and just enjoy ourselves. But wouldn't you know, somewhere along the way, we run into 3 girls that these guys knew. And I knew them too, but they were interested in them. I was kind of ambivalent about them. That sort of a thing, right? You just see sometimes that there's somebody there and I'm not so interested. There was another girl I had my eye on, but that's a whole other story. Anyway, so we saw these girls, and they started talking to them. They said, we should hang out together. There are 4 of us. There are 3 of them. I'm not so interested. Guess who was the odd one out? So I wound up, this was my first time being solo in the Magic Kingdom. So I'm walking around the Magic Kingdom. I'm like going with them for a while, and then I'm like, I'm bored with this. I don't want to be the 5th wheel here, or I guess it'd be the 7th wheel. I don't want to be the extra wheel on this. I'd rather just go off and enjoy myself. Now the thing about grad night is there's concerts going on throughout the park. There was like 1, 2, 3, 4 concerts going on, and so I went and checked out some of the concerts. I went and saw some different things. Weird Al was playing. That was one of my favorite things, and I went to every one of his shows that night. It was just really fun. I think he did 3 sets, and I went to all 3 of them. And it was just fun. It was I was already a fan, but now I became more of a fan just because of how dynamic his personality was. But I went off and, I watched the dynamics of what was going on, how security was working around the parks, how, the cast members were treating high school students because they're being overrun by high school students, basically, with nobody to kind of rein them in at all. So it was kind of interesting. And you saw some people, being told not to do something or to stop doing something or whatever. And it was just kind of interesting. And, girls would take their shoes off because, now their feet are tired because they're wearing high heels, and the security officer would come by. You have to wear shoes. So you have to put them back on. And it's like, things you wouldn't have thought of. You dress nicely, but you didn't think about the right kind of shoes. And it was just kind of fun. My tie's loosened up by now. I'm still wearing it, but I still have it loosened up. And I'm wandering around the park. And eventually I ran into my friends again. They're like, hey, where'd you go? Well, I didn't want to be an extra wheel, so I wandered off on my own. They're like, why? Really? Okay. Anyway, so we all wind up back together. We spend a little bit more time together. We enjoy the rest of the evening. There's some other food out, whatever. We do that. And then the park closed at, I want to say it was 12. We were back on the bus about 12:30 or so. And then we got home about 3:30 or 4 in the morning. And our parents had to come pick us up at 4 o'clock in the morning. Those of us who drove could drive home. I think I had my parents pick me up. Can't remember why. But anyway, we all made it home at 4 o'clock in the morning. I remember distinctly there was one guy at my high school. He was the totally preppy guy, right? The guy who was never stepped out of character. He'd have the sweater around his shoulders. He drove the high end Toyota Supra, whatever. And we go to the bus at the end of the night, and everybody's kind of disheveled. The shirts are untucked, the ties are loosened, maybe even off. And this one guy, he's still wearing his jacket. His tie is still neatly tied, and it's still very tight around his neck. And he's sitting on the bus, and it's just we're all like, wow. That's pretty funny that he wound up exactly the way we remembered him when we started the night. Just kind of funny. But anyway, it was a good time, and we went back, and that was my my last trip being a student that way. Now, that's not to say I didn't make other trips being a student. When I was at the University of Miami for a couple of years, we made a couple of trips up. I think we made 2 and 3 years or something, where we went up as just a group of individuals. We'd drive up, we'd have some fun, we'd spend the day, we'd just hang out for the day. Same kind of a thing where we'd get up early in the day, come back late at night, and we just have some fun. And it was a really good time. And, it was just fun with different people and different experiences. And, at that point, we were taking pictures and just being college kids, right? And just enjoying ourselves. Then by the time I got to UCF, whole other story, because I could go regularly and I could do solo trips kind of regularly, and I could just go over there and just kind of enjoy myself. But there's something memorable about every one of those trips that I took as a kid, all the way through high school. Every one of them was special in its own way, and they were all really fun. And, I look back at them fondly, and now I see it through the other side when I was watching my daughter go around, and I see it from the other perspective. And I can see how much fun she was having, and I can see what it was all about. There's a certain magic about all of it, and the wonder and fulfillment of it all when you're there with your friends is very different than when you're there with your family. It's just a different experience. And then even different experience when you go solo. And, you learn to adjust to each of them, and I could see it through her eyes, and it was just so cool. It was just so many neat things to watch. And I just wanted to share that as I kind of had that memory that tickled my memory about all this stuff that happened and all these different events and how much fun we had going around to through the Magic Kingdom and then to Epcot. And it was just really wonderful. And I'll never forget those moments. And I think they were great because they helped shape me and who I am. Like I said, there were other kids going off and getting wasted, but I was me, and I was having fun, and I was enjoying what Disney had to offer me. And didn't care about that. You get the certain elation from that, and there's the certain, I guess you could almost call it an endorphin release, right, where you get a certain high from just being there and the excitement of it all. And for me, that's good enough, and that's pretty cool. And I think that's what it still is for me. There's a certain excitement for being there. Well, that's my podcast for this week. I hope you've enjoyed it. Now, one last thing I wanted to share with you. I've started off my video series about Lost and Found in Disney World, and I hope you'll go check it out. I've got my first episode out there now. I hope to have many more. I'm editing a whole bunch more because I've got a lot of stuff going on. They're all going to be about 5 to 10 minutes long and talk about a specific point in Disney history or something historical that happened at Disney. And I hope you enjoy that. And if you have any questions about it, thoughts, please shoot me an email, davesdisneyview@gmail.com. And otherwise, that's it for this week. And remember, if we can dream it, we can certainly do it. Bye now.
Thank you for tuning in to the Disney View podcast. We hope you had a pleasant stay and arrive home safely. Please remain seated until your ride vehicle stops completely. Then, gather your personal belongings and step out onto the moving platform. And yes, I know it went by so quickly, but don't worry. One of the nice things about traveling on this podcast is that the journey is just beginning. Show notes are available on DisneyWorldPodcast.net. While there, please check out some of our affiliates. You'll also find links to Dave's iPhone and iPad apps. There's an app for pin trading, one for finding hidden Mickeys, and an app for finding and tracking pressed pennies around the Walt Disney World Resort. And you never know just what Dave is working on next. If you have questions, feel free to drop Dave an email at davesdisneyview@gmail.com. Original music you're hearing in this podcast is Oslo Doom by Gilberto Gil. Of course, this is a fan podcast and in no way affiliated with the Walt Disney Company.